I want to start just by showing you the global curve, how many cases being recorded every day around the world, because as we're talking about the situation improving in many countries where these vaccine rollouts are more advanced, you might be forgiven for thinking that the global situation is improving. We're actually seeing a real increase in cases at the moment, really kind of approaching the levels we were seeing back in December, January, when we were seeing the world's sort of worst cresting of the wave there, when we saw kind of 700, 800,000 cases a day. We're getting back toward those numbers at the moment. So not a great situation to be in. A large part of that spike is due to India, but not all of it, I should say. India is seeing a very alarming spike at the moment, nearly 13 million recorded cases. Remember, this is a very, very, very big country, but the steepness, I guess, of this slope, and India is now recording more cases than it ever has before. But it is not just India. Let me just show you a list of all of the countries where the 7-day average at the moment is higher than it was last week, and I'll just whip through it very quickly because you can see it's quite a long list of countries where cases are increasing quite dramatically, and the steepest curves, I'll go back to the top, are
The Lord took me into a hospital. There's a very big distress there. You see a lot of people swarming into the hospital, and I see a lot of people rushing into the hospital, being rushed with the procedure being done on somebody, and then there is testing. So somebody told me, well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, we don't have equipment. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put and culture. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put and culture.
This is a CBS News special report.
The United Kingdom has become the first country in the world to approve the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country has registered the world's first, very first according to him, coronavirus vaccine. Researchers there fast-tracked the vaccine. However, phase 3 human trials haven't happened yet. They'll go on while the vaccine is being administered to some of the public. Mr. Putin says he hopes other countries will follow suit.
So we're the first to have registered. I hope our foreign colleagues' work will move as well, and a lot of products will appear on an international market that could be used.
The first doses of the coronavirus vaccine developed by Oxford University will be given to patients today, just 5 days after it was approved.
The Health Secretary Matt Hancock says it's a pivotal moment in the pandemic as COVID cases continue to surge. More than 500,000 doses of the jab are ready to roll out.
To many, the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine is seen as a game changer in the fight against the coronavirus. It's cheaper than the Pfizer-BioNTech jab, and it doesn't require super cold storage, which makes it easier to transport, particularly to those living in care homes. The UK has ordered 100 million Oxford-AstraZeneca doses. From today, more than 500,000 will be delivered at a small group of hospitals before expanding to 1,000 centres by the end of the week. 1 million people have already received the Pfizer vaccine, but there are 30 million more in the priority groups.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning. We're breaking in right now because Vice President Mike Pence is about to get the vaccine there in Washington, D.C. this morning. He's going to get it along with the Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, and his wife, Karen Pence. So there you have it. This is all part of a continuity of government operation as well. Members of Congress and the Supreme Court will also be getting the vaccine in coming days. All concerned about the appearance of jumping the line, but this is important so that the government can function, and there you see it, the Vice President has gotten this vaccine.
he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put on the culture. What we do, we take this, and they will take a little and put on the culture."
We interrupt this program for breaking news from ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
Tonight, thousands of people given unproven COVID-19 vaccines, like medical staff, government workers, the military, after China's government granted emergency use to 3 Chinese vaccines in development. This rush to inoculate before risks are fully known is troubling to experts in the U.S. But Sinovac, one of the companies supplying doses to the government, sees it as part of their research. I have 80% confidence that the vaccine can provide protection for everyone, says the company's CEO.
So the cells are growing in here?
Yeah. China is pouring billions into COVID-19 vaccine development and has an ownership stake in most of the potential vaccines in late-stage trials. Sinovac says its CoronaVac should be ready for distribution by early next year.
A total of 500,000 doses arrived at Incheon Airport this morning around 7:30 a.m. and were distributed across 22 centers nationwide. These doses came all the way from Belgium and passed through Germany and China before reaching South Korea. They will be used to inoculate those aged 75 or over, starting from next month.
Australia has turned a critical corner in the COVID pandemic with the arrival of the first Pfizer vaccines at Sydney Airport, with the first jab set for next Monday.
On a wing and carrying everyone's prayers, the first shipment of the Pfizer vaccine, finally arriving just after midday in the most low-key of entrances, on board a Singapore Air passenger plane, flight SQ231.
Canada is beginning the biggest ever mass vaccination program in the country's history. And the first Canadians could get the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for the coronavirus as early as today. Take a look at these pictures. The very first shipment touching down at Montreal's Mirabel Airport last night, just before 8 p.m. Eastern. More vaccine will arrive today in Canada by plane, but as well in trucks driven across the border.
Singapore has received its first batch of COVID-19 vaccines. It's also the first country in Asia to get the Pfizer-BioNTech shots. The vaccines arrived at about 7:30 on board a Singapore Airlines freighter service that departed from Brussels.
At Indonesia's main airport, a highly anticipated delivery has arrived. Inside this container are 1.2 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine from China. More will come next month, and later the raw materials to allow Indonesia to manufacture millions of doses itself.
The first vaccine doses provided by the COVAX facility arrived in Ghana. The WHO and UNICEF jointly announced on Wednesday that a flight carrying 600,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine landed in the country.
The arrival of this Qatar Airways plane carrying 1,025,000 doses of corona vaccine into the country was received with jubilation at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport minutes before midnight on Tuesday.
Pfizer has announced that the latest findings from its COVID-19 vaccine study showed the jab to be more than 90% effective in preventing the disease.
Moderna and Pfizer, 94.1, 95% effective, and so they show a high level of effectiveness. Johnson & Johnson, you hear about that 72% effectiveness, but you have to remember, they compared apples to oranges, and so they're not looking at the same thing.
A lot of people swarming into the hospital. The doctors are running up and down, and many people flooding into the hospital.
No beds, no ventilators, healthcare workers overburdened. It's a sense of deja vu The healthcare system is again on the verge of collapse as coronavirus cases surge in India. This is reportedly a government hospital in Gujarat. Patients can be seen lying on the floor, some lying in stretchers in the hospital lobby. This video was tweeted by Congress leader Shakti Singh Goel. He's demanded answers from the government on the shortage of beds in the state. Hospital beds are fully occupied, healthcare workers overburdened again, and so in Morbi, COVID patients are being treated out in the open. There are no beds, so they lie on mats getting tended to by staff. There's an ambulance shortage as well. A COVID patient's body was taken out in a lorry in Vadodara because ambulances aren't available. All resources are depleted. In Surat, a garbage truck, that's right, a garbage truck was used to transport ventilators by the municipal corporation. And it's not just Gujarat, but other states as well. India Today conducted a reality check to find out if our hospitals are prepared for the second surging coronavirus wave. This is Lucknow's King George Medical University. Patients waiting in stretchers for treatment, some of them left in ambulances because there are no beds or ventilators available.
With the situation of COVID-19 getting intense in Uttar Pradesh, hospitals are also facing the issue of admitting not only the COVID patient but also the non-COVID patients who are coming here from farther districts. We are here at the trauma center in Lucknow and we have encountered with many patients, many family members who have come here to get their patient admitted, but they are facing issues with the unavailability of the beds. Many of them are saying that the patient is not getting admitted here and they have asked for the bed, but they are not getting it.
Long queues can be seen at the hospitals as families wait for some opening to admit patients in need. In Pune's Naidu Hospital, the situation is no different. We find a patient sitting on a chair as he is administered oxygen. All beds in the hospital are occupied.
The ICU ward is jam-packed. There are patients on each and every bed. The relatives are also there, the doctors are also there, and all efforts are being made to give them best of the treatment and to treat these patients who are in critical condition. Here there is yet another ward. This is also, all of the beds are fully occupied. There is a queue in waiting. Pressure is mounting.
As cases continue to go up, the healthcare system is slowly crumbling, slowly getting overwhelmed. Our hospitals are clearly unprepared and have been caught completely off guard once again by this second COVID wave.
Vidíme proroctvo Pána naplněné, proroctvo Pána oznámené 1. decembra v roku 2015. Naplněné minulého roku a stále prebiehajúce naplnenie proroctva Pána.
6 of Canada's provinces are leading the way. Alberta has the most active cases per capita now at 323. Ontario isn't far behind with 223. And more than 4,400 new cases were reported in Ontario today, adding to the already enormous strain on hospitals. Record numbers of COVID patients need intensive care. Hospitals in the Greater Toronto area have been told to close their pediatric units to free up space and staff. Elective and non-urgent surgeries are being postponed. And that may not be enough. The situation in Ontario hospitals has never been more dire. Mike Drolet has our top story tonight.
For months, Ontarians have been warned a third wave of COVID-19 could be the worst one yet. And there's no denying the rise in ICU cases. Over two-thirds of the over 600 patients in hospital are on ventilators, leading to the difficult decision to cancel all elective surgeries. That means only emergency surgeries for things like heart attacks or trauma will continue. Joint replacements, cataracts, even cancer surgeries have been put off until the COVID cases decrease, leaving patients with chronic pain at home waiting.
A lot of people summoned the hospital.
Mnoho ľudí zaplavuje nemocnice, lekári utekajú dole a množstvo ľudí zaplavuje nemocnice. Viac ako 500 pacientov denne prichádza do nemocnice. Jednotky intenzívnej starostlivosti sú plné. Išli sme dovnútra, aby sme sa stretli s jedným z lekárov, ako oni vlastne zvládajú tretiu vlnu pandémie.
is what's in store for Dr. Jamie Spiegelman as the 11-year ICU doc starts his day at Humber River Hospital.
Yeah, so I'm just reviewing my list. On my side, I have 20 patients.
And then this, another need to intubate a patient desperately in need of air.
Ďalší pacienti, ktorí zúfalo potrebujú kyslík a kyslíkové respirátory. Pacienti na jednotke intenzívnej starostlivosti sú napojení na pľúcne ventilátory. Jednotky intenzívnej starostlivosti sú preplnené.
Now, the number of patients being treated for COVID in hospitals across the UK is above 30,000, and more than 1,000 deaths have been reported for the latest 24-hour period. That's the highest since last April. The London area is at the centre of the crisis as we speak, and our medical editor Fergus Walsh has been allowed to film inside the intensive care unit.
Yeah.
Intensive care is under pressure like never before.
Jednotky intenzívnej starostlivosti sú pod takým tlakom, akým nikdy predtým neboli.
From a relentless rise in COVID admissions.
How long can you keep going like this?
At this pace, I think we've got about a week.
Staff fear burnout.
I'm here. Okay?
The nurses are broken. The physical and mental load is huge.
This should be an operating theatre, but there's no surgery here. Instead, it's been converted into an intensive care unit.
Toto boli predtým operačné sály, ale zmenilo sa to na jednotky intenzívnej starostlivosti v Británii.
They're more stretched now than at the peak last April. Intensive care is expanding across University College Hospital.
Jednotky intenzívnej starostlivosti sa teraz rozširujú,
desperately sick adults. Every day, more wards are being transformed into ICU, ready for the next influx.
We'd be running so thin on staff that you just physically couldn't look after critically ill patients.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would be ideal if we had one more time.
Greece is forcibly bringing in private doctors to help tackle the coronavirus pandemic outbreak, something that has brought its national health system to its knees. This measure will include 206 doctors under the age of 60 who will be requisitioned for at least a month in order to take some of the workload of their colleagues in Greece's most populous region.
Every day is worse than the one before. We predict that the coming days
Každý
will be a
deň
lot
je
worse,
stav
meaning we've got a
horší,
long way to go.
hovorí riaditeľ nemocnice v Grécku.
This morning in Sotiria we had 0 ICU beds available, and bear in mind that we are talking about the
Žiadna
hospital
posteľ
with the
voľná
most
nie je
ICU
dostupná,
beds in Greece.
všetko máme preplnené.
It's very hard to conceive when you drive around in sunny Florida. Things look normal. There's a few people wearing masks. But it's only when you step into the ICU environment and you realize how many people are dying from this disease and are in critical condition fighting for their lives when this becomes real. And it's so important for me to show that. The patient in this room has been on such high pressures for mechanical ventilation
Takisto sú
that
pod tlakom
she's developed
nemocnice,
air leaking out of her
množstvo
lungs
pacientov s
into her
covidom.
chest wall, just as a result of the high pressures that we've had to give her on the ventilator in order to get the amount of oxygen she needs to
Mnoho
survive.
pacientov potrebujú
On Monday, I started my day at 6:30 in the morning. At 10:30, we were on this floor when the cardiac arrest code blue call came overhead. We all then had to run from this floor up to the 7th floor, which is our ICU alternative geography. CPR, chest compressions, was underway when we got there. We had to stand outside the room, get our personal protective equipment on while watching the CPR in place. As a provider, it's extremely difficult watching a patient who needs your help, but you have to take your time and get the personal protective on. That's a challenge mentally and emotionally to stand by and to force yourself to protect yourself before going into the room. We went into the room, we resuscitated the patient. His heart was not beating for about 5 minutes before we were able to get him back. We put him on a mechanical ventilator, and the day was filled with many more admissions and many more code blues. The first chance that I had to phone his family, who was called before his deterioration to say that he was going on life support, was at about 6:45 that evening. The degree of devastation this disease is bringing to our community cannot be explained in words. It's so hard for us as healthcare providers to witness the suffering of our patients and their families from this deadly virus.
I see the lack of equipment
Já
now.
vidím nedostatok zariadení, nedostatok zariadení. Lékaři utíkají hodně. Jeden z lékařů hovoril so mnou, nemáme zariadení. My potřebujeme ventilátory.
FEMA says we're sending 400 ventilators.
Poslali nám 400 ventilátorů. Skutočne.
Čo
ja budem robiť so 400 ventilátormi, keď potrebujem 30 000? Zoberte 26 000 ľudí, ktorí zomierajú, pretože nemáte dostatok ventilátorov.
In the last 1 week, 16 countries have suspended the shot. AstraZeneca is what we call Covishield in India. In Europe, some people are said to have developed blood clots after taking this vaccine. Then the suspensions began. Denmark was the first to do it. It was followed by Norway and Iceland. Ireland, the Netherlands, Romania, Bulgaria, and Thailand. All these countries have placed a temporary suspension on the AstraZeneca vaccine. Then we have countries like Austria, Estonia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Latvia, and Italy. These have suspended a specific batch of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Spain has delayed using this vaccine to inoculate people between 55 and 65 years of age. And just before we began the show, we got a flash from Berlin. Germany has now suspended the use of this shot. 16 countries have now suspended the AstraZeneca shot. Here's a question. Is the vaccine unsafe? Or are these concerns
tak je tu otázka, či je bezpečná očkovací látka.
Let's tell you about the AstraZeneca shot, better known as the AstraZeneca Oxford shot, the same one that is being produced and used in India too. Last week, officials in multiple countries said that they had received reports of life-threatening blood clots. In a few cases, it proved to be fatal, like in Denmark, where one person died.
Napríklad v Dánsku jedna osoba zomrela po očkovacej látke. Je tu problém, že vznikajú krvné zrazeniny po očkovaní.
Out of these, 30 people experienced what is called thromboembolic events. In simpler words, blood clots. When blood clots in the vessel and blocks the flow.
U niektorých pacientov sa vyskytli krvné tromby.
Adverse events after immunization. 71 people have died after getting a shot.
71 ľudí zomrelo po tom, čo dostali očkovacie látky.
And hamper the fight against the pandemic.
You'd be forgiven for asking, what is going on with the AstraZeneca vaccine?
Čo sa deje s touto očkovacou látkou AstraZeneca v Európe?
There was an insistence that the EU would act as one on vaccines, and President Macron questioned how effective it is for older people, while the European regulator cleared it for use. Then in February, it became clear many AstraZeneca doses in the EU were yet to be used. And now in March, some EU countries, including France and Germany,
acted on their own
and suspended its use
pozastavili príjem
for the European regulators.
dodávky týchto očkovacích
Norway,
látok.
Iceland, Denmark, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia suspended the use of AstraZeneca's vaccine. A small number of people out of several million had experienced blood clots. Also last week, Italy suspended the use of one batch of AstraZeneca because a soldier had a cardiac arrest. Now, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Ireland and the Netherlands have fully suspended this vaccine's use. Now, these countries are pointing to Norway, where 4 people, 3 of whom are under 50, are being treated in hospital. The medical director of the Norwegian Medicines Agency says they have very unusual symptoms: bleeding, blood clots and a low count of blood platelets.
Pacienti
They're
mali
quite sick.
veľmi
We take this
nezvyčajné
very seriously. Here's Ireland's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, who said, it may be nothing, we may be overreacting, and I sincerely hope that in a week's time we're accused of being overcautious. And these are pictures from Belgium's largest vaccination centre in February. Far from busy. The Guardian reported that by the end of last month, 4 out of 5 AstraZeneca jabs delivered to the EU had not been used.
Johnson & Johnson has delayed the rollout of its COVID vaccine in Europe after regulators in the United States called for a pause because of safety concerns. 6 people who'd had the vaccine in the US have developed rare and severe blood clots. It's so far been given to almost 7 million Americans. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
An abundance of caution was cited by US health officials as the reason why they paused the use of the single-shot Johnson & Johnson COVID jab. The vaccine, which in Europe is branded as Janssen, was approved in the US in late February. Since then, there have been 6 incidents of very rare clots in the brain out of 6.8 million doses, so less than 1 case per million people immunised. All were women under 50, 1 of them died, and 1 is critically ill.
I think this is an unusual occurrence of a serious adverse event that you want to make sure before you go forward, you investigate it thoroughly. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're pausing so that they can look at it more carefully.
Similar, very rare clots have occurred with the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, and scientists are investigating whether this type of vaccine technology could be implicated. The biggest concern is globally. The plan was to immunise 1 billion people worldwide with the vaccine this year. If that's disrupted, it will slow efforts to finally bring the pandemic under control.
I see the lack of equipment
Vidím
now.
nedostatok
There's no
zariadenia.
equipment. The
Teraz
doctors are running up
nedostatok
and down.
zariadenia.
Well,
Lekári
one of
hovorujú.
the doctors there to speak with me, and he
Pán
says,
spôsobil,
"We
že
don't have
jeden lekár sa
equipment."
sedel so mnou a hovoril mi, my nemáme zariadenia.
Johnson & Johnson's COVID vaccine won't be part of Australia's vaccination rollout at this stage, even though it requires a single dose. Health Minister Greg Hunt's office has confirmed the government will not purchase the drug as it's too similar to the Oxford AstraZeneca jab. The European Medicines Agency is reviewing a possible link between the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and blood clots.
The COVID vaccine check-in window at a Walgreens in Brookline is closed. The State Department of Public Health directed all providers to pause use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine while the FDA and CDC review 6 cases of a rare and severe blood clot in women who got the J&J shot.
We made the decision to cancel the clinic, which would have started at 10 o'clock.
In Methuen, 630 people were scheduled to get the vaccine today at a city-run clinic.
We will get them all rescheduled. It just may take a couple weeks here.
A regional clinic in Amesbury for the Merrimack Valley scheduled for Thursday was canceled too. Methuen's mayor says they confirmed 140 more cases of COVID-19 last week. He hopes the review of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine by the federal government moves forward quickly and that people still try to get the shot.
It's going to offset some people, right? And I worry that some of those people we won't get back.
From NBC News, this is Today.
Get to this other breaking story. As we speak, the FDA and the CDC has announced that they are now recommending a pause in the use of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. The move, both agencies saying, is being taken out of an abundance of caution as health officials are investigating safety issues.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The CDC and FDA just released a joint statement. I was reading it now. That is calling for a pause, an immediate pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose coronavirus vaccine. This is after 6 recipients in the United States developed a rare disorder involving blood clots within about 2 weeks of the vaccination.
Brazilian variant, the UK variant, the South African variant. What do we need to know about all this?
Well, keeping an eye on all of these. I mean, right now, if you think about these variants as a whole, the areas that are developing these mutations are around the spike protein, something that we've been talking about for some time. the antibodies that are generated by these vaccines, they kind of provide a blanket over the spike protein. So hopefully they're going to continue to work. If there's more and more mutations or they're occurring in other areas further away from the spike protein, that may be a problem. But I want to talk about the Brazil one for a second, and this is called the P1 variant. It came from an area called Manaus in Brazil, and the reason this is significant is because it was believed that just about everyone there had been infected at some point last year with the coronavirus. Then they saw a resurgence of cases. And that's sort of what led to the investigation, saying what's going on here. When they looked at these new cases, they found that some of them were of this new variant. So there were people who were getting infected again, reinfections, and there was increased transmissibility. And now, as you point out, there is one patient in Minnesota who had returned from Brazil, got tested on January 9th, so some time ago, and that has now come back as being positive for this variant. So the variant is moving. That's not a surprise. It does appear to be more transmissible, more contagious. That is also not a surprise. These mutations allow these viruses to enter cells more easily. But at least for the time being, it does seem to be protected against the existing vaccines. But we're going to have to keep an eye on that.
But if you listen closely to even Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're starting to hear language about the variants, that it's something that is worrisome, that it is the unknown. It is the possibility that these variants could outpace where we are in vaccines that have doctors worried at this point. What are you hearing?
If you start to do the math and look at something that is far more transmissible, 50% more transmissible, vulnerable populations are more likely to become infected. In fact, if you do the math, within a month, if you had a more transmissible virus versus a more lethal virus, the more transmissible one would still lead to more deaths because it's more likely to affect vulnerable populations. That's the first issue. And the second issue, again, is these mutations overall in terms of the vaccine. The interesting thing is you don't want just the number of vaccines to increase. You do want the pace of vaccinations to increase because the more the virus spreads, the more mutations it accumulates. But if it does start to accumulate mutations that make it more resistant to the vaccine, that's another problem. That's the race that Dr. Fauci was sort of talking about.
A keď dvaja nemocnejší proroci pána zmenili Indiu, pán hovoril teraz so mnou, on ma zobral do Indie. Ja vidím, pán ma zobral do nemocnice v Indii, vidím tam veľmi množstvo súženia. Oni sa zmienili v proroctve o Indii a potom nastala nasledujúca situácia. Eliáš, najhroznejší prorok pána, zasiahol celú zem s koronavírusom. V Indii je veľmi zlá situácia. 840 mŕtvych majú nedostatok posteli v nemocniciach.
A hospital in the western city of Bhavnagar.
V nemocniciach nemajú pre pacientov postele.
Says the man filming the video. In Pune, the worst affected city in India, people are being given oxygen outside a hospital because it's too full.
Kvôli tomu, že nemocnice sú tak plné, dávajú ľuďom aj mimo nemocnice kyslík.
Field hospitals built last year to add to existing facilities are already full. This one in Pune is managed by Dr. Sangram Kapari, who's been on the front line since the pandemic began.
So what's different this time around?
Right now what I'm seeing, a single member of the family gets positive, the entire family is positive. The virulence has gone up, the infectivity ratio has gone up. It is affecting young adults, which is quite surprising.
Last year, it took more than 6 weeks for daily cases to double to the number seen at the worst of the first wave. This year, it's taken less than 10 days for infections to grow twofold to the current high, which has already surpassed 2020's peak.
And unfortunately, that record COVID cases surge continues. We're seeing the biggest surge in daily coronavirus cases in India. India is reporting now 1,26,789 new COVID-19 cases. That's a record surge since the pandemic began. 685 deaths in the last 24 hours. What this means overall, going by the data from the Health Ministry, is that active cases stand now at 9,10,319. The death toll at 1,66,862.
Well, India is reporting its biggest daily surge in coronavirus cases since the pandemic began, crossing the 100,000 mark for the first time. Hundreds of infections with virus variants from the UK, South Africa, and Brazil are being reported. Health experts are placing their hopes on the vaccination drive.
India has woken up to yet another peak in cases, the highest ever since the beginning of the pandemic, reported in one single day. 1,52,879 cases added to our tally in the past 24 hours. 839 lives lost as well. Over 1.5 lakh daily cases is the highest ever since the beginning of the pandemic. And in fact, if you look at how this entire week has been, this is the 5th consecutive day when India has reported over 1 lakh cases daily. That means in just the last 5 days alone, we've added 6,72,000 and more cases to our overall tally.
Amidst a record surge in coronavirus cases, there might be another thing to worry about. A double mutant strain of COVID, which some believe is one of the reasons for the exponential surge in cases in India. This double mutant variant was first identified around March end. Like other variants, it has differences in its genetic code. What makes it scary is that it carries the markings of 2 previously known virus mutations. The double mutant has been traced in at least 5 Indian states. Cases have also been detected in other countries, including the United States, United Kingdom, Singapore, and Australia. The 2 mutations it has emerged from are known for their high infectivity and transmission rates, making this version, the double mutant of the virus, all the more dangerous. The double mutation allows the virus to gain entry into human cells more easily and multiply faster. Now remember,
COVID-19 infections is now sweeping across Europe. COVID-19 cases and deaths are on a rise, and the continent's slow vaccine rollout is aggravating the crisis further. Let's begin with France now. Angry Parisians express their frustration as France gets into its 3rd nationwide 4-week lockdown, and people say that their businesses are already suffering and that the new restrictions will completely disrupt the already thin finances. Last week, the Macron government announced new measures to contain the country's worsening COVID crisis, and only essential businesses are allowed to remain open for the next 3 weeks. Schools, restaurants, movie theatres have all been ordered shut. Coming to Germany, thousands of people marched through the city of Stuttgart to protest against coronavirus-related restrictions. The protesters held banners that read, "There is no pandemic." Face mask requirements and social distancing rules were completely ignored at these protests. But the protests were believed to be largely peaceful. Romania, on the other hand, is now experiencing the same situation, where hundreds took to the streets of the capital, Bucharest, for the 7th straight day of demonstrations. The people are protesting against new measures imposed to curtail the spread of COVID-19. The new regulations include an 8 p.m. curfew, shorter shopping hours for hard-hit regions.
Ľudia v národoch protestujú proti nariadeniam vlády, že musia byť uzavretí. Mnohí ignorujú nariadenie vlády, že majú nosiť masky a takisto odstupy. Takže protesty proti tomu, aby neboli zatvorení.
France's President Macron is describing as Europe's third wave. In Italy, they began a new lockdown on Monday. That means tight restrictions across the majority of the country. People cannot leave their homes except for essential trips. In Germany, they are seeing the numbers of infections rising after they eased restrictions. Chancellor Angela Merkel will meet with regional leaders next week to decide what to do there. In France, hospitals are under pressure with patients moved from ICUs in Paris to other regions. Around 4,000 patients in intensive care there in Paris. A really grim picture. And
Pán vychádza von so smršťou, aby zasiahol zem pre ich nepravosti, pre ich hriechy, pre ich vydierania, pre ich rúhania sa, nepravosti, nemorálnosti. Aleluja. Ja vidím, že pred vami sú náročné dni. Oblak Boha prichádza. Prichádza z neba, aby navštívil zem. Takže toto sa sťahuje na Nový Zéland, Spojené štáty americké, Európu, všade. On prichádza na zem. Oblak Boha prichádza. Oblak Boha prichádza. Európa, Fínsko. A potom, keď žiadal národy, dlhý čas Pán skrze jeho dvoch najmocnejších prorokov Biblie, aby činili pokánie a navrátili sa k svetosti. Potom, ako žiadali národy po dlhý čas, aby činili pokánie a navrátili sa k svetosti. A pripravili cestu pre slávny príchod Mesiáša. Eliáš, najhraznejší prorok Pána, zasiahol celú zem so smrťou kvôli zlyhaniu činiť pokánie a pripraviť cestu. Cirkev Kristova, ste si vedomi, že toto je hodina pre čistotu v cirkvi? Cirkev Kristova, ste si vedomi, že toto je hodina, aby ste sa navrátili v cirkvi, aby ste sa navrátili. Aby ste sa navrátili k Pánovi. On hovorí, že dôvod nebo bude oslavovať. Bude priamo na základe na spravodlivosti cirkvi. Dovolte mi to vysvetliť. Inými slovami Pán hovorí, že Mesiáš čaká a hodiny tikajú. Ja som prišiel vám oznámiť. Hľa, toto je hodina spravodlivosti v cirkvi. Pán hovorí, že práve teraz cirkev v Austrálii musí sa zhromaždiť v národnom pokání. Manila, Filipíny. Ja som prišiel, aby som mohol zobudiť cirkev. Pán ma poslal, aby som s vami zatriasol. Aby som vás zobudil. A aby som vám dal vedieť, že deň a hodinu nikto nevie. Pripravte spravodlivú cirkev v tejto cirkvi. Pripravte svätú cirkev v tomto národe. Čas vypršal. Ja som videl Mesiáša, ako prichádza pre cirkev. Boh žiada ľudí Koreji, aby činili pokánie a odvrátili sa od hriechov. A pripravili sa na Pána pánov. Pripravte sa na kráľa kráľov. Činte pokánie. Navráte sa k svetosti. Navráte sa k spravodlivosti. A pripravte cestu na príchod Krista, Mesiáša. Prebudenie tohto času, posledného času, musí byť sveté prebudenie. Musí to byť prebudenie svetosti. Prebudenie svetosti. Návratu k svetosti. Pretože to je na prípravu cesty pre príchod Mesiáša. Pamätáte, ja som videl Mesiáša, ako prichádza pre cirkev. Pripravte cestu. Odvráťte sa od hriechov. Zorganizujte národné pokánie vo Fínsku. Každý národ teraz musí zorganizovať národné pokánie a pripraviť cestu pre slávny príchod Mesiáša. Ja som prišiel, aby som povedal Švédsku. Prosím, prosím, prosím. Čas vypršal. Navštívenie je tu. Poďme začať teraz sa zameriavať na nebeskú oblasť. Pán hovoril so mnou o príchode Mesiáša. Takže ja som prišiel oznámiť cirkvi v Švédsku, že toto je hodina, aby ste sa navrátili ku krížu a ku krvi.
Pán ma poslal,
aby som povedal ľuďom Českej republike, aby som im povedal, že toho Ježiša, ktorého vy milujete, prichádza. A keď on príde, je to určitá cesta, ako Česká republika sa musí pripraviť. Spravodlivosť. Svätosť. Pán v tejto hodine teraz odstraňuje cirkev od hriechu. Teraz odstraňuje cirkev od hriechu. A navracia cirkev k spravodlivosti. Inými slovami, Pán berie slabú cirkev Európy. Cirkev, ktorá nemá moc, a dáva jej naspäť moc. A on hovorí, že tá moc je spravodlivosť. Je to svätosť. Mnichov Nemecka. Najmocnejší proroci Pána zasiahli celý svet so smrťou kvôli zlyhaniu v činení v Pokánii a príprave cesty pre slávny príchod Mesiáša.
The Lord says, le Seigneur dit, I am coming. Je reviens. The message is clear. He is coming. Le message est clair.
Il revient. That means
time is over.
To znamená, že čas vypršal. Ja som prišiel tu oznámiť,
that the door will soon shut.
Že dvere sa skoro zatvoria. Dnes vy sa potrebujete pripraviť na príchod Pána. Ale ako sa pripravíte? Pokáním. Odvrátením sa od hriechov. A navrátením sa k Pánovi.